My name is Laura Boswell and I am a printmaker. I specialise in relief printmaking, Japanese woodblock and linocut. I was lucky enough to study at Aberystwyth, and I did a degree that was joint fine art and art history. And in our final year, we were able to specialise, and I was actually the only person in the year then who specialised in printmaking. When I'm working on a Japanese woodblock print, it all begins out in the landscape where I will find something that I think will work for a print. And I take a sketchbook and I do lots of little sketches and I take a lot of photographs. Central to Japanese woodblock printing is the paper that's used. The name washi is a kind of catch-all, and it's for long fibred paper. It means that you can have a lightweight paper that is very durable to the hand printing process, doesn't mind being wet, it's very strong when it's wet, and it also expands evenly. So the basis of a woodblock print begins with the drawing. I will use that to take a tracing. When I have a tracing, I can move on to transferring that to the block, which I do with carbon paper. And the frame that I have drawn around the print, I usually have a 2 centimetre frame around the print. I make a couple of lines, which I will then use to cut the registration. Cut little shelves into the wood. Those are called kento. And those help me line the print up. Because I'm using the same edges to map those out each time, they should all line up for each block. And then I will trace each block in turn, draw out my registration marks, and then trace each particular block. And getting your different blocks to all have exactly the same registration, it comes with practice. When I was studying in Japan, we would ask about this, and we had a translator because the master who was teaching us carving didn't speak English. And the master would answer at some length, and the translator would say, "You'll get the hang of it." And that was like the default answer for things like that. And he was quite right. You do get the hang of registration. I cut the outline of the woodblock using a hangito knife. And that is a knife designed to cut a sloping line to create woodblocks where they have a wider base than they do top, so that when I put my pigment on the top of the block to print it, the excess pigment runs down the sloping line and it goes into a moat, which is the next thing I cut away. I cut a nice deep moat around the block so that there's space for the excess paint. And I will work my way through all the blocks until they're all cut and they all have a moat around them for paint. So I'm cutting, as I say, Sheena plywood here, which is very soft. If I were cutting cherry, then I would probably stop and sharpen the tools quite a bit as I go. With this Sheena, I know that I can cut this block and I don't have to stop and sharpen this knife. So it very much depends on the kind of wood that you're working with. I mix watercolour pigments. Now it has to be water-based pigments, it doesn't have to be watercolour. I will mix those with nori. That is simply a mix of rice flour and water, and it makes that watercolour slippery and sticky and able to spread out on the wood to make a nice clean sheet of colour that will transfer to the paper. And then I will take a printing brush to massage that colour onto the block. So I'm not painting with my brush, I'm actually using it like a massage brush to make a sheet of colour on the block. The damp paper comes out of the damp pack and is laid into the kento, the cut little shelves of the registration, and then falls onto the block, and use my bamboo baron to take the impression. And that is repeated as many times as needed to build up colour. So I might print a flat colour. If you think of a traditional Japanese block, you often have skies where there is a darker band at the top of the sky. You'd print the pale colour of the sky first, and then you would lay a darker colour in a line, and a few little dots of rice for lubrication, and then you would use a brush to swirl that into a bleed of colour to create that shading effect which is so well known in Japanese woodblock printing. Would simply go from block to block to block to block until the picture was complete. And then when the print is completed, it comes out of the damp, and I would put it between two sheets of wood with a weight on it and let it dry out completely, and then the print is finished and can be numbered and signed as an edition. And when I'm editioning, inevitably I kind of mix more colours and I change the colours slightly as I go. I'm not very good at fixing on something and staying to that plan, so I like the kind of organic exploration of colour that comes about when I'm actually printing. I think for me, the artists that I was really fascinated by were people who drew, and I've always found it very interesting to look at people who are drawing for another purpose. So maybe a ceramicist or a sculptor who is creating drawn work that describes volume. When I'm creating a print, I'm always looking to explore that idea of wild landscape, but also that it's sort of part of a bigger world. There's always a path through to things. I like the contrast between kind of a close foreground and far distant. Certainly when I first studied Japanese woodblock, it wasn't a well-known process, and so it had that allure of being quite mysterious. You could do it in your bedroom without any problems with materials. So I think it's a sort of combination of the mystery of it, but also oddly the accessibility of it as well.